Welcome to the bi-weekly Special Fathers Network Dad's Zoom call. It's November 3rd, 2020, and the topic for tonight's discussion is losing a child. Very serious subject matter, and I'm thrilled that we have a good number of dads who are part of the network and some that are just learning about the Special Fathers Network to join us. So from a format standpoint, what I'd like to do is to have each of the dads who's on the call tonight make a brief self-introduction. Where do you live? Married, unmarried? Do you have children? How many children? What are their ages? You can talk about the special needs of your child. And then if you want to share what you do from a work standpoint, that would be great too. And then once our brief self-introductions have gone by, I'm going to come back. We'll probably do it in the same order that we started. And I'll ask each of you to make a little bit more detailed presentation about what your experience has been losing a child. And I'd like you to try to limit your presentations to maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And that'll allow everybody to make a presentation. And then I'd like to go through a series of questions, and then we'll wrap up with advice that you might be able to share with a dad who may have recently lost a child, or just advice that you want to offer overall. So, Jim Mueller, the Zoom stage is yours.
I was afraid you were going to say that. Yeah, Jim Mueller. I live in Delray Beach, Florida. Thus, my background. And with my wife, Margot, and my daughter, Lily. So I'm trying to remember everything David wanted us to say briefly, and those two things don't coalesce in my mind too easily. But I think I work as a consultant, mostly in the not-for-profit sector, but I do governance, organizational development, and philanthropy consulting, which I've done for quite a long time. And my son, Luke, passed in December 4 years ago. So he was 21 at the time. He had spastic quadriplegia and it was significantly disabled. So I'll stop there.
Jim, thank you for that introduction. Rooster, over to you.
Awesome. Hope you can hear me okay. Thanks for the opportunity tonight, David. Friends, it's going to be fun. I look forward to the next 45, 50 minutes. Rooster is what I go by. From Louisiana. Married my high school sweetheart. The Marine Corps had us leave Louisiana, and 25 years later landed us in Virginia Beach, which is where we are now. We had 3 children. Our middle child is Ainsley. She passed away in February of 2016 at the age of 12 from extremely rare neuro disorder. I, like I said, did the Marine Corps thing for about 25 years and decided that I just got tired of cutting the hair. So the hair started growing and I stopped cutting it, retired out, and I'm now serving as the president of my daughter's legacy through Ainsley's Angels of America, a nationwide nonprofit, about 25,000 members, 34 states, 75 cities. And I'm really excited to share as much of Ainsley's story and my grieving and our family's journey that you all would like to care about. So thanks again for having me.
Rooster, thanks for those remarks. Sam, over to you.
Yes, good evening. Thanks again for having me on. It's good to see all of you. My name is Sam Rodriguez. I am married to a beautiful, beautiful lady. I have 3 children. Our first one, Manny, was born and passed away back in 2008. I now have 2 other children, Emma, who is 10, Ben, who is 8, and they're awesome. I will challenge any of you with your children. They are awesome. And I'm currently the chief operating officer for a large multimodal transportation company. And I'm based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota right now. So that's where I've been now for about the last 4 years.
Thanks, Sam. Daniel, over to you.
All right. I'm Daniel DeFabio. I live in the Albany, New York area, Saratoga Springs area. My wife Tina and I had 2 boys. The oldest was Lucas, and that painting is a reference to Luke. He was named after Luke Skywalker. And he passed 5 months ago. He had Menkes disease, which is a copper transport disorder. And the prognosis was 3 to 10 years. So he beat those odds. I run my own small marketing firm called DeFabio Design, and I run the Disorder, the Rare Disease Film Festival.
Thank you, Daniel. Doc, over to you.
Yeah, I'm Doc Hunsley. I am the executive director and founder of SOAR Special Needs, which is my son Mark's legacy. I've been blessed to married, just celebrated earlier a few months ago our 25th wedding anniversary. Have 3 children. My oldest son is Luke. He's 19. My youngest daughter is Sarah, soon to turn 11. And then Mark, this past Sunday, November 1st, marked 10 years ago that he passed away at the age of 5.5, had Dravet syndrome, which is a very rare genetic seizure disorder, as well as autism. And SOAR Special Needs, like I said, is now his legacy. We serve families and individuals with disabilities throughout the United States and truly all over the world.
Thanks, Doc. David, why don't we go to you?
Okay, David Steele, founder of dsteele. I have a wife, Colleen. We have 3 daughters, Ellie, Aubrey, and Madeline. Back in 2015, my wife and I, moved down to Plainfield, Illinois. I'm from Illinois, right outside Chicago. We were expecting Aubrey Violet. She was born on May 28th. Due to medical complications on May 29th, she passed away. So I founded a nonprofit called Dads of Steele. Ultimately, it's a platform for dads to come and just be connected. We do have a grieving dad group that meets every Sunday, and we have members all over the world that join.
David, thank you for that introduction. Don, why don't we go to you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Don Raineri. I live in Downers Grove, Illinois, and I am a board member on Dads of Steele with Dave Steele. Been married to my wife for 33 years now. We have 4 children. My oldest, Anna, is 29. My daughter, Marisa, is 27. My son, David, will be 22 on November 11th. He has Down syndrome. And his twin brother, Nicholas, who was otherwise healthy, died at birth. I work in research and development in a global pharmaceutical company where I am the vice president and head of regulatory affairs for the US region.
Thank you, Don. Andy, welcome.
Hey, man. Hope y'all can hear me. I'm having to half parent, half do this. So now, Andy.McCall from Greenville, Tennessee, which is in East Tennessee, right on the North Carolina border. Have 3 children. My first daughter, Penelope, she had a rare genetic disorder called Schenzel-Gideon syndrome. And it, much like Dravet's, a lot of seizure activity and with PMG. And she passed away in 2016 from another rare disorder. That she had a meduloepithelioma and passed away at St. Jude. And we were there for a short stay and then came back, and she passed away right before her 2nd birthday. I have now I have 2 beautiful 2-year-old twins who trying to keep quiet back there a little bit. And but now I'm a teacher. I teach 2nd grade. I've taught for 12 years. Football coach for the first 11 of those. And now I work for St. Jude. I'm one of 3 dads in the bereaved parents program. And we're parent educators and work with doctors and fellows. And so really excited to be here. And I'm most recently with the Dads of Steele with Dave and Don. So, very fortunate to have those men in my life as well.
Andy, thank you for those remarks. We have one other individual, Chris. I'd like you to just introduce yourself briefly. Chris is an upcoming podcast interview, and I think he's participating more out of curiosity than because of the subject matter. But over to you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, David. My name is Chris Wade. I currently live in Kirkland, Washington. I am a single father, divorced, have 3 kids, 2 boys that are typical ages 13 and 10, hard to believe. And the youngest is Luca Quinn, and she's 5 years old. And she is the one blessed with the Wolff-Hirschhorn syndrome, and it's a wide-ranging genetic deletion of the upper 4p chromosome. And she's currently thriving, and we praise God for that.
Chris, I'm glad you could join us. Thank you. So just briefly, before we go around the horn again, the Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. And our objective is to connect dads, the more seasoned dads, with dads who are close to the beginning of their journey, raising a child with the same special needs. And the biweekly podcasts, the biweekly Zoom calls, like tonight, are meant to provide dads with an opportunity to share some of their experiences and to be able to put it out there on YouTube for dads in the future to listen and learn a little bit more about the Special Fathers Network, and if they're inclined to engage, either as a mentor father, like many of the dads who are on the call, or perhaps a mentee father if he's close to the beginning of his journey. So what I'd like to do with the next round is to have each of you delve into a little bit more about your child with the special needs, talk about the experience, and then briefly about how you've been able to put this tragedy, a parent's worst nightmare, losing a child, into perspective. And we'll go in the same order, just to keep it simple. So Jim, it's back to you.
I'll go back to what I was starting to say, is that we had Luke in our lives for a good long time. And as anyone who has a child with special needs, that they become the center of your life pretty much, because everything starts to revolve around them. It impacts the entire family dynamic, I think, for us. And even knowing that Luke was not going to be with us a long time, as with all of you, it's that moment of passing that is pretty disengaging. The way I managed that for myself was surprising to me. It wasn't something I had planned, but I started writing. And so I ended up writing what I call lyric prose. Some people call it poetry, but I can't claim to be a poet. I'm far from that. But that combined with a narrative, I found that I was processing my way through the sense of deep loss to a place where I could find more light and more happiness and a sense of integrating that experience into our life and our family life. But it also, disrupts the family as well. For us, it did anyway. And just reorganizing relationships after 22 years of the child being the glue was rather challenging. So that's taken a lot of effort and focus since Luke died. But let me stop right there and pass the baton.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Rooster, back to you.
Maybe just for context, and I don't want to mess the flow up too much, and this can be part of my time. Could y'all just raise your hands if you've lost your child in the past 2 years or shorter? Okay, got it. And that was just, I think you said in May, fairly recent, May-ish. And then everyone else, are we between 2 and 10 years? Is that what I understood? Okay. And there's no one here who hasn't lost a child, with the exception of Chris. Is that, am I tracking correctly? Okay. And David, of course. Yeah. All right. Wonderful. Now, with that said, David, can you tell me exactly what I'm supposed to say right now in terms of the context of the question that you're asking us to answer right this minute? I just want to make sure I stay on track.
Yeah. Thank you for the clarification, Rooster. And I think it is important maybe to remind people that a more recent loss would be different than something that happened 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So thank you for pointing that out. Not any less impactful, but there's a lot more time to process everything and reflect on the experience. So what we're hoping to accomplish with this sort of second go around is to have you explain more precisely what your child's situation was and how you've been able to process the loss and what's transpired since then.
Got it. Yeah. So infantile neuroaxonal dystrophy, a mouthful to say, INAD for short, globally terminal. You don't see any indications of any issues until probably about 1 to 18 or 12 to 18 months. And then at that point, the toxins build up on the nervous system globally and basically attack the entire nervous system. At diagnosis in 2007, she was one of 7 in the United States. So there was really not a lot of information on the topic. So when we originally got the diagnosis, to answer that particular piece, she was 4 years old. They said between the ages of 5 and 10 that she would live until she went to 12. So during that, 8 years, it was many roller coasters. So the first one was the diagnosis, which, as you all can relate to, like, that's grieving in itself. And you go through all the stages during that. So I'm not going to re-educate everybody on what that felt like. But through the living years, as you watch this thing progress, you watch your child essentially die in front of you. And whether that's going to be 1 day or 8 years or 18 years, there's nothing easy about that process. And every one of us handled it differently. In my case, we got introduced to the opportunity to go running together. And when that happened in 2008, that took on a whole new life of itself. So I would run with her as often as possible, just like I would go to my son's hockey games and I would go to my daughter's dance recitals. So it was a matter of dealing with it through finding a way to connect and enjoy the time that we have together. I could go on, as all of you could too, but I think that was the essence of David's question. The last 20 seconds would be to say, when she passed away in February of 16, everything happened again, all those same feelings, because you just go through that grieving process. My active grieving instills courage, magic. I'll talk about that the next time I get a chance to.
Thank you, Rooster. And Sam, it's back to you.
So 12 years ago was when our son passed away and was born. So our situation's a little bit different than I think what I've heard so far from the rest of you. Our son was born and we were told, I shouldn't even say we, my wife had gone into the hospital for some issues and complications she was having and was immediately put on under anesthesia and an emergency C-section. So she was under anesthesia and not able to wake up when we got the diagnosis that he had triploidy, which is, they told us, of course, is a fatal condition of 3 of every chromosomes. He wasn't going to make it. We had a very limited, very quick amount of time for me to process and make a decision on what we were going to do with him. So we took him, we loved him, we held him. He lasted for a good number of hours before he passed away, only barely after my wife was able to wake up. So she has honestly very little personal remembrance of him, which is something that is breaks my heart even to this day. So I'm going to hold it together, I promise. What turned out to be a little bit more complicating was after the autopsy, after he was born, he in fact did not have triploidy and was likely just premature. So there's a certain level of complication and complexity to our situation, dealing with the feelings, especially as a dad, with those decisions that happened that had to happen really fast in those moments. So without belaboring that point, I will say, to answer your question, what we've done since, some of the things we've done since, we started a fund at Akron Children's Hospital where he was born and was cared for, and we use those funds regularly to educate the medical community on what families go through during grieving moments and during times of loss and tough diagnosis, and trying to help the medical community get some semblance of understanding of what the families are experiencing and how they're feeling and what they're thinking. And then I just want to say the one last thing is that my wife has done, give her all the credit in the world, is she decided that on his birthday every year, we were going to, so August 7th was the day he passed away, 8/7. So she has decided that every year on his birthday, as a family, we're going to do 87 random acts of kindness for other people that we don't know. And the whole message behind it is we save up all year and we go do things, buy things for people, do stuff under the auspice that we want you to experience just a little bit of joy of the joy that he brought to our lives in the short time that he was alive. So that's, I think, to answer your question, that's not for praise. It's to say, by outwardly expressing and sharing joy with other people, it helps us deal with the emotions of, rather than just sitting around and feeling terribly sad on his birthday every year. So that's something that we have done. And again, much more I could go on, but like everybody else, I will pass it back.
Sam, thanks for sharing. And I was really touched when we did your podcast interview and you shared what it is that you do to celebrate your son's life with these 87 random acts of kindness. And if I remember correctly, you said it's not as easy as it sounds, right? To pack 87 of these in from the start of the day to the finish of the day, and no matter how good you're trying to be. So anyway, I just want to say thanks again for sharing. So Daniel, back to you.
Yeah, Lucas was diagnosed at age 1, and Menkes disease, also called kinky hair syndrome, is a problem with your ATP7A gene. So you don't transport copper correctly, and it's neurodegenerative. And, you know, like Rooster said, we probably all go through the diagnostic grieving, the pre-grieving that is, you know, while you still have your child. And then, of course, you lose your child. And I think in some ways we were kind of prepared, you know, at least we were told it was coming. We knew it was coming, and we tried to pack his life. You know, we knew it'd be shorter, and he a little bit beat the odds, 11 years instead of 10. That was the outside sort of prognosis. We're very confident he had a very happy life. And, you know, as probably many of you did, you question what would a longer life look like, and how long might be diminishing returns, how long might be too long, more pain than is worthwhile. And, you know, we don't get to decide these things, but I think it provided a bit of comfort in his loss that we weren't really rooting for a very long life. It wasn't going to be good for him. I can't say that it was easy, but maybe it helped. And in terms of his legacy, you know, I tell his story everywhere. I tell his story in a film. I built a film festival to show that film, and I built a TV channel to show all those films that are about other people's rare diseases. So my efforts on his behalf have become as much as I can on all 7,000 rare diseases, not just Menkes disease.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. And you and your partner in crime, Bo Bigelow, co-founder of the Disorder Rare Disease Film Festival, do some amazing work, which is worthy of some further conversation. So thanks again for sharing. So Doc, it's back to you.
Yeah, so Mark was, you know, when he was born, we thought we had a completely normal, healthy boy. When he was 8 months old was when he had his first seizure, lasted over 4 hours. Again, when he was 18 months, we got the diagnosis of Dravet syndrome, and then autism at the age of 2. I'm a physician, so it was the first time in my life, I you know, as well as my wife, she is too, we're both pediatricians. We went from taking care of kids with special needs to all of a sudden being a parent of a child. And that's when we first got it and understood. But just like Rooster said, yeah, you know, we could spend a whole time on just the whole grief you go through when you get those diagnoses. But, you know, we tried to help Mark live the fullest and get the most out of life, do everything we could. He was pretty healthy outside of the seizures and everything that he had with Dravet syndrome. And then when he was 5.5, he passed away in his sleep. So, you know, I'm extremely thankful that, you know, he had zero pain when he passed away. And I shared in my podcast with you that I think he knew it was happening, and he in his way was telling us goodbye when I laid him down for his nap. But you know, it was 10 months after that I launched SOAR, so that we can serve families. But you know what I have learned through the whole process, and especially that first year of losing a child, you know, lack of a better term, I call it a year of suckage. It's just the year of suck. Everything sucks. You've got to go through that, all the first holiday, the first birthday, the first Christmas, the first Father's Day, all of those you have to go through, and it just sucks. There's no way to get around it, and you just have to go through it. And each additional year, it still hurts. We just had our 10-year, anniversary of his passing on Sunday. It still hurt. We, did fundraiser to help, our nonprofit and his memory. And so a lot of things we do to help that. But one of the key things that we've learned all the way through this is we continue to talk about it. And I'm proud to be able to talk about my son, because I'm not going to allow his memory to disappear. I'm going to allow that to continue on, his legacy now through SOAR, but be able to do that. I'm also blessed. I'm also a pastor. And so as a result, I've been able to work with other families, and we've had several kids who have passed away in our ministry that I've been able to do their funerals and walk with them. But that's one thing I will always tell every family and every funeral I ever do is, so many times, you get so much support that comes to you at the whole week leading up to the funeral and at the funeral. And then after the funeral, it's crickets. Nobody wants to talk to you. Everyone's afraid to say anything to you because they don't want to remind you that your child passed away. Well, what I always say, no one has to remind me. I wake up every day missing my son and knowing he's gone. But I thrive and I love when someone talks to me about my son, because it reminds me that he's not forgotten by others. So I encourage everyone to always talk and share and remind thoughts and just share. And while it might hurt, and yeah, I might cry sometimes over it, those are tears of joy because I'm remembering great memories of my son. So that's one of the things I always encourage everyone moving forward is, friends, family, continue to talk through, because that's so important and that also helps in the whole healing process with it. So that's, my kind of quick story with that.
Doc, thanks for sharing. Saving lives and saving souls. You're a 2-for-1 type of guy. Thank you. David, back to you.
Well, first off, I just want to say, one of our focuses in Dads of Steele is being courageous. And for all you dads to share these stories, it just reminds me, and I'm sure Don and Andy can relate. Every Sunday, if we have a new dad that comes and shares their story, it gets emotional. And so I just, commend everybody for sharing that. Aubrey Violet, she was born premature. She had a hard time developing her lungs. When we went to bed, my wife and I at the hospital, we had some hope. We thought that she was in the best place possible. And, at 6 a.m, the doctor came in. They said they had to revive her several times throughout the night. They found some bleeding in the brain. And you're asked to make that call on the spot. And, the call being, the doctor said, we don't know when she's going to take her last breath. So we can unhook her to all the machine, the machine that she was on and everything. And, at that time of my life, I just felt helpless, or I felt out of control. I played sports all my life. So, I worked hard. I could be a starter, on the basketball court or whatever. I looked at my wife. We didn't know what to say, what to do. My wife finally said, okay, if it was your child, what would you do? And the doctor said I would, spend the most time with her, holding her, giving her a kiss. We did that. And then I believe she took her last breath when she was in my wife's arms on May 29th. To fast forward, I think Don, Andy, and I always say, it's a community that no one wants to be a part of, but it's a community that we're never going to get out of. And it's a scar that's going to be with us forever. I'm a pretty routine guy. So there's a song that I listen to every day. So I would encourage any dad, to find that, that song I just heard, and it clicked with me. It was a Christian song by 10th Avenue North called By Your Side. Like I mentioned, I played college sports, and I dedicated my workouts to my daughter. She was born on 5/28. I burned 528 calories every time I stepped foot into the gym. That ended up transpiring into a tragedy turned my life around article in the Men's Health magazine, the national magazine. After I did that, through about a year after, I just felt like maybe there's a way I could show support and help other dads with that. So yeah, that's the Reader's Digest version. Thank you.
David, thanks for sharing. Don, back to you.
Yeah, thanks. So my story is a little bit different than everyone's. So 22 years ago, my wife was pregnant, a healthy pregnancy with twins. We were having twin boys. I had 2 girls already, and felt like I was on top of the world, going to have the perfect family with 2 boys and 2 girls. And I went with my wife to a routine doctor's appointment about a month before her planned C-section, and the doctor said that he was having a hard time finding one of the baby's heartbeats. So we rushed to the hospital. They rushed her into surgery to do a C-section, and unfortunately, they weren't able to resuscitate Nicholas. He had his umbilical cord wrapped around his neck. So I just remember being in the delivery room, praying over Nicholas, and they delivered David, and the doctor came up to me and said, "We think your son might have Down syndrome." But my reaction at the time was, "But he's alive." So that was really, what shaped our lives. We never saw David as someone with a label. We just saw him as a boy, and we were just happy that he was alive. He did have some early medical complications. His bone marrow wasn't producing platelets, but that kicked in after just about a week. But my life has always been complicated by, grieving, being the strong dad for the rest of the family, trying to explain the loss to my girls who had pre-identified each one of the boys that they would take care of, and then there's one baby, and then it's like the poem by Emily Kingsley talking about you planning your trip to Paris and you end up in Amsterdam. So you think you're on a journey, and then all of a sudden you end up in a different place, but you actually you learn to love the place that you end up with. So that's kind of been our journey. So the grieving, even it'll be 22 years on the 11th. It's still hard. I have to learn how to compartmentalize my emotions on the day. I grieve for Nicholas, and I celebrate David, and that's kind of been consistent. But we always, David does a great job of keeping his brother's memory alive. He's talked about often. We light a candle every time we have a family gathering, so we feel that Nicholas is always present with us. And most recently, these last couple of years, working with Dave on Dads of Steele, it's been just a great opportunity for me to share my experience and to help others, but also learn from others, because grief is a lifelong journey, and it's a journey that I'll always be on, and it sometimes the burden feels less, and sometimes it doesn't, but it's something that I carry with me every day of my life.
Don, thanks for sharing. Andy, I think it's back to you.
Yeah, so going last there, I can piggyback on a lot of, I know, Rooster, you said Ainsley was one of 7 with Penelope Schentzel Gideon. She was one of 15 in the United States and one of 80 in the world at one point. So that we all have those myriad of diagnosis and doctors, and you become a caretaker as much as you are a dad during this point. And the biggest thing, I could talk about all that. We made a couple decisions throughout our life that, you know, some went really well, some didn't. You know, we fought in the Tennessee legislature before the Farm Bill to legalize CBD in Tennessee, and Penelope was one of 3 kids that bill was named after. And, you know, that went well, but some other things we didn't. So I think the biggest thing I dealt with was the decisional regret, and I didn't handle a lot of that real well. And, but Jim, like you said, you sort of started writing. I wrote a book that was my thoughts on from when Penelope got her cancer diagnosis till a year. So that first year, the doc that you call it the first year of suck there. So that was my way of dealing with it, was writing. And now St. Jude uses that book for the new fellows and sort of get a dad's idea of what we're going through during those times. And I go talk to nursing programs and around here in East Tennessee, because in East Tennessee, we don't have the greatest healthcare sometimes, and it's limited in other times. And so anytime we can get that word out, especially from a dad's standpoint. So that's been one of my goals is to try to give dads a voice, especially at St. Jude when I can. And anytime I get to do that, like you all, when you talk about your kids, you know, I get to be Penelope's dad again during those points. And that's why I do whatever it is. And now with Dads of Steele, with Don and Dave, who are, you know, they talk about courageous, but they're supermen. And they've helped me out through some things. And, you know, I think that's getting out and getting those stories out is the most powerful thing we can do as men, because, you know, we're not represented a lot, especially in the special needs community and the, you know, cancer, end of life, and especially bereaved dads. You just don't hear as much. So like I said, I appreciate y'all and fortunate to be able to share Penelope's story too.
Andy, thanks for sharing. Thanks for being part of the call this evening as well. So what I'd like to do in the next round is to have you reflect. If there was something you wanted to share that you didn't share, please. But I'd like you to reflect on the advice you would provide a dad who may be grieving the upcoming loss of this child because they know they have a terminal illness. Or, you know, what advice can you offer a dad beyond perhaps what you've already mentioned, who has just lost a child or lost a child more recently, with the thought that, you know, this is going to be a YouTube that will be listened to in future weeks, future months, and, you know, future years for that matter. So let's go back around the horn. Jim, back to you.
There we go. I think everyone individually sorts it out, is to grieve your own way. And don't let anybody tell you that your grieving is wrong, because it's the way you're finding your way through this extraordinary trauma that's disrupted your emotional, psychological, familial, civics, social life, right? Because it's disrupted everything. And it's interesting to hear all of your stories about how you have found the way that fits you. And I think for me, that's just part of it. Find out the way that you work yourself through this process to come out to the other side with it more integrated and wholesome feeling. And for me, it was writing that book. So.
Okay, thanks, Jim. And what I'd like to do is add on, and Jim, if you'd like, I can go back and you can talk about Lily. Most of you have other children, and I know the circumstances are all different, but if you would like to share not only what the grieving process was from your own perspective, but how you were able to help your spouse and your other children go through the process as well. So Jim, I'm going to send it back to you.
That's a really interesting question, because we're all 3 of us who are here are so fiercely independent. My wife and daughter are Taurus women, so right there, it's a tough one. I think being present. So just to be present and listen, find the moments of quiet. And again, this is how we did it. And with my daughter, it's just being there for her and when she needs it. I found that she confides more in her mom. She's 18 now, but so she was 14 when her brother passed, and she is still sorry that she never finished reading his favorite book to him. She only got partway through it. And that's pretty heavy, but it's being honest and open with our feelings and being present, I guess, more than anything, because I don't know how I could help them more than be present because they found their own way as well.
Thanks, Jim. So Rooster, back to you.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff to pack into one specific question or requirement, but I'm going to try to give it a good try. I mentioned MAGIC earlier, and I don't know if any of you have heard the acronym before. Again, My Active Grieving Instills Courage. If you've heard it, just put your hand up. I'm kind of curious with this group. And not to my surprise, we haven't heard of it. Ultimately, it identifies with me really, really well because, as was just stated, you're going to grieve your own way. And the my part is something that we're never taught. We're taught about there's no I in team. We're talked about, trying to be part of the collective effort, that selfishness is a bad thing. Well, I think there might be an exception to that rule. And it took me until my daughter passed away for me to realize that. And that is that it's okay to be selfish in your grieving, if that means that you're going to be active in your grieving, because you're going to not be able to help anybody around you, whether that's your own parents, your own kids, your wife, your husband. You're not going to help them if you have not figured out how to actively grieve. And a lot of times what happens is if you can figure out how to actively grieve, and there's so many things, all the gentlemen have already listed things that they have done. I ran every day for 1,492 days in a row. Why? Because that's what worked for me. At least 1 mile outside, rain or shine, because I could go run with Ainsley. Not everybody can do that, and I shouldn't expect you to, but having an outlet and a place where you can go and try to connect and try to actively grieve through that process, whether it's writing a book, whether it's being part of Dads of Steele and having the courage to come together as a collective, whether it's lighting that candle at the family dinner, as was mentioned, continuing to talk about her or him, or having her or him asked about. Everything that we've already said before is actively grieving. And until you can figure out really how to accept that that's okay, you're not going to be okay. And don't try to be Mr. Fix-It, because you're not going to fix anything until you're honest with yourself and you actively grieve. And I'm getting a little aggressive in my voice because I've seen too many fathers who have refused to actively grieve. And that has sent them to their grave. So now you have no spouse and your no dad is around anymore because you've taken your own life, because you didn't find the outlet. And if we can do anything for you right now, if you're on YouTube 10 years from now and you're hearing this and you're having a hard time finding an outlet, reach out to any one of these guys' faces on the screen right here, because we will tell you all the things we did. We'll tell you all the books we read. We'll tell you all the gods we spoke to. We will tell you all the things that maybe somewhere in there you can actively grieve. I'm going to reserve the rest of my time because I can get really fired up and keep going. So back to you, David.
Thanks for laying off the caffeine before you got on the call, Rooster.
It's funny you say that. I haven't had caffeine since February, and that's part of my active grieving process, but I can laugh with you. No caffeine. That was pure emotion, baby.
Okay. I love it. Sam, back to you.
Yeah, I would. So to the first of what if I remember correctly, 2 questions of, do we have any advice we would give? Piggyback on what Rooster said, I will give just kind of 2 pieces of advice that have stuck with me. First of all, for a newer griever, for the lack of a better term, I would say, find a friend, find a true friend, a real friend. And for me, that was a guy who, and I've told the story a bunch of times, but it was a guy who genuinely took me to the golf course. In case it's not obvious that I'm a golfer and all of my everything. But anyway, he took me to the golf course. He put me in the golf cart and we played around and did not speak for 18 straight holes. Didn't talk. He didn't ask me how I was doing. He didn't ask me how my emotions were. And he just waited for me to speak first and didn't talk to me. And that was, it may sound incredibly boring to someone else, but to me, that was exactly what I needed in that moment, because it was somebody who made me understand that he cared about me, and he was willing to give me what I needed in that moment. And if you can find somebody who can give whatever that is, whatever that looks like for you, to you, that's one of the greatest things that helped me. And there's a million pieces of advice we could give, but that was what was most powerful for me, because in that moment, I knew I had someone who wanted to understand what I was going through. And so to piggyback on that, the second thing is on the ongoing advice. So now when we're not just a new griever anymore and we're kind of going on, I would say, be okay not getting over it. Be okay not solving it. So as an executive myself, my job is to assess, to plan, and to solve, and to really drive things forward. And this particular piece of life is something that, first of all, no one can plan for, no one can be ready for, no one can have a plan of action ready to go to jump on as soon as this happens. And so when it does, just be okay not solving it, because it's not solvable. It's not something you can fix. It's not something you can change. And so don't let that be a stumbling block for you. To the second question of how are you helping your family move on, I will just revert back to this, because there's a bunch of things that we do, but that acts of kindness for Manny's birthday that we do every year is something that now my kids have a blast. They look forward to that every year, because they get to spend the whole day making other people smile. And then when they ask us why we're doing it, we get to tell them that we don't want anything from them. We're not looking for money, donations, nothing. We just want to tell you about our son. We just want to tell you about this amazing kid that brought joy to our lives. And we think it would be selfish for us to hold on to all that joy for ourselves. And we want to tell you about him, and we want to share a little joy with you today. And it is, I will end on this sentence. It is so, I said I'm going to hold together, and I am. It is so rewarding and weirdly joyful on such a sad day to see my two little kids light up every time they get to talk about their big brother, Manny, that they never got to meet, but he's so real, so personal, and affected them so much that they can share his story in such a powerful and exciting way on his birthday. Moves me. So unless I missed something of your questions, I will end it there.
Sam, thanks for sharing pearls of wisdom. Daniel, back to you.
Yeah, it's probably good that I follow Sam, because that really meant a lot to me to hear that you cannot plan. There's no way to plan, because I think that was something that we left hanging, that we literally had on a to-do board in our kitchen, plan Lucas's funeral, because we knew someday, and we never did plan it. And even if we had planned it, he died during this pandemic. COVID wasn't really a factor in his death, other than the way we all live now, right? So whatever funeral plan we might have had would have been thrown out the window because of social distancing concerns. And sure enough, we haven't had a gathering yet. So your plans had to change. But another sort of parallel to the COVID pandemic mentality that we're in, especially around March, when we all had to get used to this, everybody talked about flattening the curve. And it didn't change, the idea of that didn't change the amount of damage or distress or tragedy. It just changed the span of time it happens in, right? And I think in some ways, pre-grieving and knowing that you might lose your child gives you the opportunity, if you're honest with yourself about it, to flatten the grief curve a little bit. You're gonna have the same amount of tough emotions, but you can process them over more time than the family whose loved one is hit by a bus suddenly. So that's a long way of saying we saw this coming, but we also used the time. I think we processed in advance as much as we could. And then back to not having a plan, and to bring in the other part of your question about how a sibling copes. We were really blessed with Alex, our 9-year-old. One of our pandemic things was to get out of the house and take a walk. We ended up taking a walk in the graveyard about 2 blocks away. And that may seem macabre or heavy for a little kid, a 9-year-old. But on one of those walks, he said, "What kind of funeral are we going to have for Lucas?" And that was the big question that we hadn't answered. And he started to answer that. He said, "Well, I think we should have a tree that grows from Lucas's ashes. And so now we do, because of him. And so it's really like, I think it's a verse out of Isaiah, a little child shall lead them. He masterminded, he answered the questions that his parents hadn't answered yet. And then when we didn't do very much of a ceremony for Lucas's trees in our backyard, but we talked about, should we say something, and we were mostly silent, but then Alex asked his mom and I to step away so he could sing a song to his brother. So it's a heavy burden for anybody. It's a heavy burden for a 9-year-old, but in some ways he's guiding us. But I think it all stems from really facing it as much as you can, not being in denial of what's to come, because that is, the books on grief and grieving will tell you it's not just death, it's any shock event, right? That's why diagnosis gives you grief also. So the shock event is maybe something you can mitigate because you have advance warning. You can work on yourself, you can work on your expectations. That's the biggest probably advice I can give.
Daniel, thanks for sharing. That is very profound to have you reflect on your experience, and your 9-year-old son Alex is sort of leading the way, if you will, or directing his parents through the process. That's very profound. Doc, back to you.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that everyone said, and I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Rooster was saying. First thing I need to say is real men grieve, real men cry, and it's absolutely okay to bawl like a baby with it. It's actually healing with it. It's hard, like I said before, it sucks, but you need to grieve. You've got to grieve. If you don't, you will never, ever get over it. And I can't agree more with Rooster. Your life will never be able to move forward with things. And I've seen far too many people have their lives destroyed because they are not willing to grieve, or they're too masculine to grieve. And that's just not right. Real men will grieve. Real men will cry. As far as working with the rest of the family and things, I think one of the most important things, especially working with spouses, working with your other kids, is listening. But I don't think it's coincidental. If you change the words of listen around, you spell silent. And the most important part of listening sometimes is just being silent and giving someone else the chance to talk. Or sometimes just sitting in complete silence with someone, like Sam was saying, that can speak volumes sometimes. But for me and my wife, for instance, I would have a bad day, she would have a good one. She'd have a bad day, I'd have a good one, and vice versa. And so we were able to help each other out through that, and be able to be there for one another. For my kids, it was being aware of what's going on. My daughter was 10 months old when Mark passed away. So, I wanted to make sure I helped Mark's memory stay alive with her. I never had to do that. She, for the next several years, would talk about Mark daily and would tell us how, she talked with him and did all these things with him, which, some of the stories she said, I really believe she may have had conversations with him. It was, kind of bizarre with that. But it also required me with my oldest son, Luke, being aware with him. He was having a super hard time grieving. And it was me being silent and listening and observing. And for him, being a sibling of a child with special needs is hard. That's very difficult. And he was having a hard time grieving because part of him felt happy for losing his brother, because all of a sudden he wasn't being beat up by his brother anymore. he could now maybe do things with his friends that he could never do before. And so because of that, he felt a little release and he was happy about it, which caused him then to feel horrible because who am I? I should not be feeling happy that my brother died. And so that made him feel horrible. But it wasn't until I was able to sit back and try to watch and see, why can you not grieve through this and what's going on, and actually talk through that and do that through counselors, that helped him be able to move forward. So it's important as a dad that you're in touch with your kids, that you talk about it. And so you can never act like this didn't happen, because it did happen. It's real. And it's going to affect every single one of your kids. Even my 10-month-old, it drastically affected her. And I saw how that affected her over the next several years to come. And you've got to choose, several have said, everyone grieves in their own way. And that's so true. And you've got to find what's right for you. But you need to grieve. You need to listen. You need to be there for your family and just walk them through it. Have other friends that'll be there for you too. Those are key things. And I'll completely second everyone else. I would love to talk to anyone, whoever hears this, and anyone who ever needs help. We're all here for you. It is a brotherhood. I think it was David that said, excuse me, this is a brotherhood none of us ever wanted to be a part of, but we're in it now for life. And we need to link arms with other men and help them through it. And so any way we can do that is the best thing moving forward. But, sometimes just being silent and listening to the rest of your family is the best way to make it through.
Thanks for sharing, Doc. David, back to you.
Okay. Yeah, just piggyback out of everyone. Just piggybacking off of Don, I would say, or Doc, I'm sorry, being vulnerable. Early on with Dads of Steel, I talked to a gentleman on the East Coast. He was a former Green Beret, and he had he lost his spouse. And he shared with me, I could show you a tough guy, badass resume. I was in the Green Beret. I played a college sport. But one of the hardest things to do as a man is to share your emotions with people, share your feelings. So I would say be vulnerable. If I could tell my former self, or if I could reflect on things I didn't do the best job, I know early on, when I was feeling angry and frustrated about the dishes not being done and having arguments and fights with my wife, I knew that there was anger coming from losing a child. So to piggyback off of Rooster, finding that outlet, for me, it was exercise. Maybe for someone else, it's writing a book or journaling, or even seeking professional help. It's okay to see a therapist. It's okay to get connected. One of the other focuses on Dads of Steel is being connected. Find a group, whether it's a spiritual connection, a connection at the gym. And then, one of the things, we have a dad in our support group. His name's Robert. He's from the Netherlands. And if anyone ever talks to anybody in the Netherlands, he's a straight shooter, real straight from the gut. And he's taught us so many things. And if you're ready to answer the question, how many kids do you have? I would say to any dad, when the timing's right, when you're ready to answer that question, you're in control of that conversation. So for an example, I was at the park a couple weeks ago with my daughter, Madeline, who we have Irish twins. So Aubrey and Madeline were born within a year. And the dad asked me, how many kids do I have? And I said 3. I had three girls. And you can take that however you want to, but you can control those conversations. And lastly, with my 4-year-old, how do I, I think this would just be with our family in general. I believe it was Sam, maybe, you do those random acts of kindness. I think that's amazing. I would say look out for signs. Madeline, a couple years back, we got her in like a soccer class, and with Aubrey Violet, we always think of purple, the Purple Heart. And after one of Madeline's soccer practices, this is the first time the soccer coach gave everyone a stamp. And you think about all the different colors, all the different kinds of stamps someone could have. The coach that day gave everyone a Purple Heart. And I just felt like Aubrey was with us. She's always with us, but those are the things I would say.
Thanks for sharing, Dave. Don, back to you.
Yeah, boy, it's hard to go close to the end because everyone's pretty much touched on some of the thoughts that I had, but I really want to echo what Rooster and Doc both said. You really need to take care of yourself. You can't continue to suppress your grief day after day after day. I mean, it really takes its toll. So you have to grieve. You have to find that outlet and let it out. And as was said, real men do cry. And it's just really you just can't hold it in and be strong for everyone else. And I think you have to learn to accept too that you'll have bad days. You'll have bad days. We had this discussion recently within our grieving dads group on Sunday that you'll have bad days and then you'll have better days. And I think you just need to accept that. You're not, there's no secret to having more better days than bad days, but you're just gonna have to accept it that there will be bad days. So those would be my two pieces of advice. And in terms of my wife and I stayed very, very connected, and communication is key. And just sometimes that is just a silent communication or just listening. As far as my kids, my daughters were 7 and 5 at the time when we lost Nicholas, and they both grieved individually. And for a while, I was so consumed in my grief, I didn't see how they were dealing with it. But my oldest one was just keeping everything in. She felt she needed to be strong for her younger sister. And my 5-year-old was very, very emotional, asking, why her baby had to die. And it's, you just have to be aware of those signs and look to see how they grieve and make sure that they have an outlet to talk about it. And for my younger, my kids, we did have counseling and professional counseling, and I think that was very helpful as well. But sometimes, you get so wrapped up in your own grief, you don't see how your kids are dealing with it. But it's really important to watch your kids for signs and making sure that they have an outlet to talk about it as well.
Don, thank you for sharing again. Andy, we've got you in the most difficult seat of all to go after all these individuals who've had a lot to say, but take a whack at it.
I just keep Xing things off my list. I knew Dave would quote Robert, our man from the Netherlands, and Don's always got some wisdom, and all the other men too. I think the biggest thing, as a dad, is just validating those feelings. We all want healing to be linear. We want to be, okay, I'm feeling awful today, I want it to be great tomorrow. But we go up and down and back and forth, and change emotions 7 times before breakfast sometimes. And I think as in my early journey, and then as I've learned, all those emotions are okay, and I have to be okay with that. And like everybody said, I found my outlet. And you're going to go to those dark places, but you got to find how to get out of there real quick. And I think that's the biggest thing that I found, and early, like, a lot of us, I played college football. I was a coach. I'm a teacher. I had all this control, and, I thought of myself as a real man. And a lot of times I viewed grief as weakness. Grief isn't weakness, but it's just a price of love. And it's the price of how much we loved, our kids. And it hurts so bad because we loved so deep. And I think that was the biggest thing that I had to tell myself every day was I'm not being weak by crying or, going out here and running until I can't pass out. I have to do these things. And, one of our dads said the other day, something that hit me pretty hard is I thought that going through all these emotions was leaving Penelope behind and leaving our kids behind by working through these. And he put it the best by, you're moving ahead and moving forward. You're not moving on. We'll never move on from what happened, but we're just moving forward. And, that's what they would have wanted too. So, dealing with my wife and, we've had our ups and downs like everyone, but, just to reiterate what everybody said, it's communication and being there. And say what Doc said, to rearrange those words of listen and silent, man, that's big time right there. So if you got to scroll back on YouTube to hear that, I can't say it any better than that, but that's some good stuff right there. But what we've all said, we're all dads, we're all in the same situation, but to work through it is to move ahead. And I think that's the biggest thing we all have to do.
Andy, thanks for sharing. Good way to sort of wrap things up. At the risk of going way over our time limit, I'd like to do a lightning round, which means very quick. If you have something that you'd like to add or say, don't feel obligated to say anything if there isn't anything to add. And I'd like you just to maybe suggest a resource. If there's one resource that you could direct individuals to, and we'll be able to include a lot of these in the notes that go along with the YouTube that we're going to produce. So it'll be easy, hopefully easy for a dad or a parent for that matter who's watching this, who wants to get additional resources. And naturally, we can put all your contact information there as well. So one last time around, Jim, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. One thing that I quickly wanted to say was that someone mentioned signs, but ours, Luke, was a red cardinal. My wife used to look at the red cardinal with him all the time. And so on the day of we dedicated a fund at a children's hospital. On that day, the cardinals showed up and just sat right on the chair next to the window. And my daughter, part of her grieving process, and I'm sorry I didn't mention this earlier, now has one tattoo, and it's a red cardinal on her ankle. And that was a really important part of hers. Resources, all of you guys, those are the resources, I think, contacting any one of us. The other thing is Heal Grief Group. If you haven't heard of that, it does a nice job. They've got a tremendous website. I did write the book. And I think that part of that is there. I laid out my soul on the page there. So I also welcome people to pick that up as well. So.
Thanks for sharing, Jim. Back to you, Rooster.
Whenever I received the diagnosis, I was on the USS Bataan in the middle of the Indian Ocean, probably 4,000 miles away from home. And the first place I went to after I got the information was to the Catholic father who was on the ship there as a practicing Catholic. I thought that I could go to him and get some kind of great words of advice. And to my surprise, he handed me a book. And the book that he handed to me, I show to you tonight. It's called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Interestingly enough, it's written by Mr. Kushner, who actually is a rabbi. And I found it very interesting that the Catholic priest handed me a book written by a rabbi. And as I grabbed it from him and I looked at it closer, I looked back up at him kind of in surprise. I thought he would give me a passage in the Bible or something. Rather, he said, objectively read this book as soon as you can, and you're going to find some very interesting guidance. And I was it was profound what's in here. All the things we've always heard, like everything happens for a reason, or this whole thing about why'd God do this to me, or why us, or all the things that every one of you have heard, probably questions of yourself, things that people have told you. Hey, God only gives special children to special parents, all those things. And I'm not knocking any of them, but this gentleman does a great job of examining all of those slogans that you're pondering and trying to get through in your head. So I would love to recommend When Bad Things Happen to Good People for anybody to read.
Thanks, Rooster. Back to you, Sam.
I will say I have no things to add, because if I want to add something, I'm going to add a lot of things and I'm going to go crazy. And so, and then you're going to have to turn off my video and audio. So I'll just go with, I have nothing else to add right now, but I'd be happy to add anything and share with anybody that is listening that's looking for any more information from me, I'd be happy to share it. The only two, I should say three resources that I can provide you links if you'd like for future reference, is the three things I went to. First and foremost, I went to my Bible, because for me, that was important. I shouldn't say right away, because I dealt with some serious regret and emotional issues for about 6 months to 10 months based on our situation. But once I got to that point, I went there first. The book "Where Is God When It Hurts" by Philip Yancey was a huge book for me. There's a lot of truth in that book. And then there is another book called "Letters to Fathers" that was written, and I actually got to contribute to that book, and was able to write to fathers some helpful and emotional advice that, for what it's worth, mine's one of a very small of many letters. It's a great book all the way through, but a good resource there.
Thank you, Sam. Back to you, Daniel.
I would recommend a couple of podcasts. At least that was helpful to me. One is "Once Upon a Gene" about raising special needs kids. Some of these just hit me at the perfect time, the perfect message. Terrible Thanks for Asking by Nora McInerney. And even a couple episodes of Hidden Brain, which can be on a variety of topics, but I happened to catch one about being on life support, as maybe that issue is sort of looming in our future, and help me sort of wrestle with some of those issues. And David, your podcast. So podcasts are sort of, I think, my training wheels to getting to the silence that Doc talks about. It's not quite silent, but it's contemplative.
Well, thanks for sharing, Daniel. And the Hidden Brain is Hacky Reitman, who happens to be one of the other dads who's involved in the network as well. So thanks for sharing. Doc, back to you.
Yeah, so for me, I'd say, anything you can do as a family to continue the memories are great. You can see on my shirt, the logo for our organization, it's green. And the green is because that's my son's favorite color. And so that's his legacy. So every birthday, every anniversary of his passing, our family wears green shirts, just as memory. We release green balloons as well. Go to the cemetery, do that. So things we can do. Whenever we get a family picture, we have a picture of Mark with us in that picture, because he's still part of our family. And so, our family's not complete without him there. So those are things that we do to, as a family, continue that. As far as a resource, one of the resources that was given to me that it's a super fast read, a very small book, but it's by Dr. J. Vernon McGee, and it's called "Death of a Little Child." And while, yes, it's kind of geared more towards younger kids, and that it honestly applies to any child with it. And that's a book that I've now have gone and purchased. I purchased a case of them, and I give that to every dad and every family that experiences loss. But that helped me a lot. And then, also I can say, me going into the Bible and digging into the Word, and that was key for me. So those are two big resources for me.
Doc, thanks for sharing. David, back to you.
Thank you. So Rooster, I will say I got this book too, but I actually haven't read it yet. My wife read it. She it really helped her. So I have some homework. I'm going to read that. I contributed to a book called "Fathers Speak on Death of a Child" by Emily Long. Each chapter is our children's, the name of the child. So Aubrey Violet is on page 64. I would say, we have a website, dsteele.org, DADSOFSTEELE.org, or send me an email, david@dadsofsteele.com. Every Sunday at 9:15 Central Time, we have a Grieving Dad group. Goes for about an hour. We've been going for about probably an hour and a half. And then if you're about 2 years out, I would say the post-traumatic growth book. Those are some resources. And you know what, if you're not willing to reach out, try to get connected in some way. You know, it was a blessing to meet Don at my gym, and Don and I have, you know, have this lasting relationship now, and that came from just me connecting at the local gym. So,
Thanks, Dave. Back to you, Don.
Yeah, so a last word for me. So I wrote something, and Dave actually posted it on the Dads of Steele Grieving Dads tab, and it was grief is a reaction. Courage is a decision to confront your grief and give meaning to the loss we've experienced. So yeah, just, you know, don't be courageous, you know, confront your grief and give meaning to your loss. In terms of resources, yeah, I don't have any resources that I recall from my loss because it was some time ago. But you know, for me, an organization like Dads of Steele, or I know there are other dads out there that have grieving dad support group, but really find that network that resonates with you and it is meaningful to you, because the brotherhood, as was mentioned before, that and the fellowship that you have in the discussions, those are very rich and meaningful and continue to help me even 22 years after my loss.
Thank you, Don. And batting last in the order again, Andy, back to you for the last time.
There we go. Well, to sum it up, Over My Shoulder, Pigtails and Steel, like I said, is my book. I've never read it, so don't hold me to anything in there. I just wrote when things happened in my life and I couldn't deal with it, and I just wrote, and so there's that. The other one I had is Upside. It was in 2015 about the new science of post-traumatic growth by Jim Rendon. Pretty good. We use that. You know, I deal with a lot of dads at St. Jude end of life with cancer and things like that. And, you know, Andy.McCall at stjude.org, you know, always trying to help dads go through those things. But, you know, definitely recommend Dads of Steele, and hope, you know, sort of this new venture, you know, if you need another grief group or some of our grief support, that will be in the future for sure. So definitely reach out, guys.
Andy, thanks again. I'd like to thank all of you for sharing your thoughts and being so transparent and authentic about your experience, which I think is part of the message that I heard tonight, which is that, you know, you need to process your grief, and each of us does that in so many different ways. And keep in mind that, you know, you might not be processing your grief at the same rate that your wife is or the mother of your child is, and having the grace to acknowledge or recognize that, so that you know, you're able to be there for one another along the way. So that's a wrap on tonight's bi-weekly Special Fathers Network Dads Zoom call. We're doing these every 2 weeks. The next one is going to be on November 17th, and the topic is respite in marriage, which is a super important topic that relates to all families, not just families with special needs, that the parents can find some time to focus on one another and their relationship. So we'll put in the show notes along with YouTube all the resources that were mentioned here and the contact information, so that it'll be easy to follow up with any of the organizations or individuals that were referenced here today. Thank you again, and thanks for participating.